All right, what's good, everyone? Ninja To Viaduct back at it again. I'm Andrew, and joining me on tonight's podcast, which are we a podcast if we only post video content on YouTube? In any case, joining me tonight is my brother Chris and our good friend Raymond. And really, this is just where we come together to talk story and take some deep dives into kind of whatever we're feeling. But up until this point, we've kind of focused on games, but we're going to try to do something a little bit different tonight and see if we can expand beyond that, at least just a little bit. But who knows? In any case, without further ado, let's dive in. So, for tonight's topic, we're going to go a little bit more freeform and really just talk about whatever's on our minds. So, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Raymond first. Raymond, what's something that's on your mind?
Okay, what I'm feeling is like the first stages of gaming burnout. It's like, as of now, I have about 8 games that I want to play. Maybe 4 games coming out this month in the next couple weeks. Half of them are maybe MMOs. So I'm just like, I feel like at this point, like, I don't know. I don't know if it's maybe I have to reduce the amount of games I want to play, or like I don't know if you guys have the same problem with like backlogs and everything, or it's
Mm-hmm.
just too many games getting released. But I feel like this is my second job now. Like trying out new games, anticipating. I mean, I'm already looking at my calendar for like February when Monster Hunter comes out, so I have to prep for that. November we have the Path of Exile 2 early access. So I'm gonna be hunkered down for maybe a couple weeks. But then the current games I'm playing is gonna get backlogged, and then the backlog I already have is gonna get backlogged. So I don't know. Like back in the day, like when we were kids, if we had a birthday or a holiday, we only could get one game from our parents. And now that we're older and we have all this disposable income, now there's just too many choices. I don't know. I don't know if you guys feel overwhelmed, or maybe you guys are more smarter with your gaming choices, but yeah, I'm
I mean,
definitely feeling overwhelmed.
yeah, I get I'm actually in the same boat too. I mean, just like you said, it was definitely easier to play games when we were younger and finish them from end to end. And right now, just like you were saying, I have a backlog too. I have a lot of single player games I want to play, and I have a huge list like on my wish list in the PlayStation Store, for example. I have like at least got to be more than 10 games that I haven't gone to yet that I want to play. I really do want to play, but it's hard. It's not only just time too, but it's also the well, I think about it. It is a lot of it is time, and I'm starting to find I don't know if it's me or not, but I'm starting to feel like games these days are definitely getting longer to play. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if not 10 hours, like maybe a average game is 20 hours. You have some other games, especially single player games, RPG games, which I have a lot in my backlog too. It's like 40 hours for some, maybe like Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth I finished recently. I mean, I put that one more than 100 hours. And yeah, there's just a lot of stuff to take in, and I guess that's just what the situation for us is, right? It's just we're getting older, and yeah, we have this disposable income to play and buy these games, whichever we want freely, and yet we're having a hard time trying to play them. Even for me, even just putting in like an hour or two a day is a bit hard. and actually have to make like a very concerted effort to actually try to play it. But also like, but also, I guess also in some ways, I don't know how you feel about this, Raymond Andrew, but I also found that because of the time commitment, I'm actually a lot more pickier with games now, like what I'm willing to even wish list. Like I can imagine myself, being much more open to playing a wide variety of games, whether they're good or bad, back then. But now, given the time crunch, I'm definitely much more picky. Even games that are maybe like still considered good, but just maybe not top tier. Um, like maybe if it's a review from 1 to 10, right? If it's not like a 8 or 10, I may not consider playing it. Not because I don't want to play it, but because I'm trying to manage bankrupt buck my time, right? If I'm gonna play a game, invest like 10, 20 hours, I'm probably gonna focus on the the highly rated games. I'm not sure how y'all feel about that, but that's kind of my approach these days.
But imagine if, because maybe your favorite types are Final Fantasy, Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
But for me, I feel like, imagine if there's 4 to 5 Cyberpunk like games coming out each month or each other month. Because like the time commitment is an issue, but for me personally, there's like 5 great games coming out. So it's like it's really hard for me to choose. But that's my issue. There's just too many good games coming out.
Do you often roll credits on your games?
Roll credits?
Yeah, like finish them and then like
Oh no, because
like get to credit screens.
Because I guess mostly I do. I guess it's mostly live service like MMOs too.
Oh, okay.
So like never ending stuff.
Yeah.
But then like this month there's 2 MMOs. Like one is Throne and Liberty that came out last week.
Mm-hmm.
And then New World console is coming out next week. So it's just I don't know how I'm gonna juggle the time to, I want to play both. It's not like one's better or the other. It's just and then next month Path of Exile is coming out, so it's just hard to choose these days.
Okay. Well, I'm kind of curious. So, I mean, I know me knowing about you and your type of games and like a lot of them like at least a live service, a lot of looters that take a lot of time to kind of go through and grind a bit. But hearing you say that you want to play this variety of games, I find it interesting because for the games that you play, I figure a person would get the most enjoyment when they do invest a lot of time, right, to get as much of the different items that you can get from games. But if you're playing different kind of games, I mean, you would be splitting your time between these games, right? Therefore, maybe not necessarily, I guess, experiencing the most each game could possibly provide to you.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm always trying to find the perfect game. But like Throne and Liberty has great combat. New World has great crafting system. So, I mean, I wish a game had both of those. But then I mean, those are, in an MMO, like that's what I like doing, like the combat, crafting, looting. It's just each different game like has its strength. So yeah, it's hard for me to. Yeah, it is like it's better if I invested in one game. But then I kind of, I don't know. Sometimes you just plateau and you just hop around. So maybe it's more my issue. I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of got that way with a lot of my games. I mean, for me, it's a little bit more staggered. Like I mean, I'm usually behind on all my games. Rarely do I ever play anything when it releases. I wait like a couple months, even like just years before I even do anything. But sometimes I will pick up like multiple large open world games, and I'll just like jump between them throughout the time. And sometimes it just like I'll reach a point in a game where it just feels like it loses its luster. And then I'll jump to another game which basically has the exact same mechanics, but I don't know. I guess just being in a different environment feels a little bit more refreshing that way. But yeah, I do often jump back and forth between games, and like just like one night, it's like back in the day, it was like Mad Max, and then I would play like Assassin's Creed Odyssey the next night, and just like do this back and forth for about a month or so. Yeah, eventually I fell out of it for both of them, but I'm also kind of of the mindset like once I put in about 10 hours or so, like a good 10 hours, not just like lounging about or anything, or like just having the console running. I feel pretty content where it's like I've gotten my money's worth, and so if I don't finish it and it's just kind of there now, that's fine. And maybe I'll come back to it. I have done that for a couple of games where it's just like I didn't play it for a few years and I came back and then I wrote credits. But yeah, usually my mark is about 10 hours or so. I'll feel pretty content.
Yeah, yeah, I can't. I definitely don't. I mean, I definitely understand the feeling, but for me, I definitely try and make a concerted effort to stick to one game at a time. Primarily because, well, primarily because one, if it's something I'm really engaged in, like of course I just kind of want to like get it going, just kind of see everything as fast as I can, right? Um, versus kind of extending it if I kind of jump between different games. Um, but also, it's just as much as I try to enjoy the games I play, I do notice that even for example, even for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, right? Like I really enjoyed the game, the story, being able to play that world again, and the stuff I was doing in that game. Over time, though, I definitely was telling myself I was pushing through the story as fast as I can, primarily because I just wanted to kind of get all that story in me and get it done. Um, whether that's a good thing or bad thing, not too sure, but I can't. I would admit that sometimes me playing games that way maybe taking the joy of the game a little bit out of me just because I'm trying to like rush through it. So yeah, maybe your guys' approach is a bit better, right? Kind of splitting your time and your entertainment, amusement between different games is maybe more of a healthier thing. I don't know.
Yeah, the only downfall about MMO is you can't really backlog it because it's constantly getting updates. So, like, if I backlog an MMO for like 3 or 4 months, it's just you'll be so behind. Like, depending on how the MMO is structured, but like a game like New World, like a semi-popular one, if I jump in like 4 months later, it'll be harder to find people at the same level as me. Harder to find dungeon groups and raid groups. So, I don't know. Maybe it's just FOMO. I don't know.
Yeah, I do think that has something to do with it too. But I mean, it's kind of hard to say, especially with like all of these new MMOs that are coming out. Like with some of the ones that are kind of like cemented, like Final Fantasy 14, right? Like that period of time where like all three of us were playing it. It's already been kicking for years, but they still had quite a bit of people still playing at all levels. And I think with that one too, their sort of like feedback loop was pretty good, where you can just kind of hop back into any dungeon and it'll scale too. And that was kind of like part of the system, right? To get players engaged. I thought that was kind of interesting, but I do remember like some other aspect, like the last other MMO I played prior to Final Fantasy 14 was like Guild Wars 1, and I do remember jumping into that late, and it was just like you had to do this hard quest, but there was no one to party up with, and I just had to use like the NPC allies which couldn't do anything. And so I just got wiped every time, and I couldn't progress in the story at all.
I mean, some MMOs do have catch up, you know, power ups.
Hmm.
You know, if you have to swipe, then I mean, you can catch up, but yeah, it's kind of hard to I don't know. I guess overall that's been on my mind, just looking at my release dates, and I'm just getting stressed out. You know,
So what would be
first,
your ideal game? Because you mentioned that probably one of the reasons why you're playing all those variety of games at the same time, those type of games, is because you're trying to find the quote unquote perfect um, live server type of game or the games that you play. So I mean, what do you think, top of your head, would keep you just focused on one? Like, what would you need to see to kind of keep you engaged in just one for an extended period of time instead of hopping around?
um, okay, well, I guess Lost Ark is probably the best action RPG MMO game, and I think a lot of people agree. I mean, their crafting, their I don't know, like world exploring, dungeons, raids, they're all good. It's just they have heavy paywalls.
Mm.
So I guess if that game maybe turned subscription based, or maybe the devs maybe roll back the like heavy monetary incentives to, you know, because you can kind of, it's pay for convenience mostly.
Mm.
Like, do you want to grind for 2 weeks to upgrade one gear, or just pay $50 and, you know, just get that over with? So like I mean, I quit that game. But if that game ever maybe kind of scaled back their paywalls and or go like WoW or Final Fantasy, I think that would probably be my forever game.
Yeah, definitely not a fan of paywall games. I mean, games that have like battle passes, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I can get into that. It's fine, but definitely paywall stuff is definitely not my thing, and I definitely find it more irritating. Like there are a few games out there that I thought, yeah, I don't want to play this. Some on mobile. There were a couple of stuff on mobile that I found interesting. Thought would be interesting to play, but at the moment they had paywall stuff and like the knowing the intentional game design to make it such that you're either going to progress very slowly or hey, pony up, pay 5, 10, $20 or more just to make your game experience, you know, more efficient, therefore more enjoyable. Yeah, I do have a hard time getting behind that. So I mean, yeah, I mean it would be cool. I mean, if it would have been cool knowing that that game probably was the best thing for you, but just because of the paywall, that's unfortunate.
Hold on, they're super clever too,
Yeah,
because they kind of hook you in for a month, and let's say you're at level 60, and then new content, new patch is to level 65, right? So from level 1 to 60, it's very easy. You feel like what you're doing matters, like your progression. Then boom, when you're like kind of heavily invested in your character, what the game does is like, because most of the gear upgrades are RNG. So let's say 59 to 60, you have like a 70% chance, you know, your upgrade will be successful. 60 to 61, that thing drops like to like 2%,
Oof.
right? And then the crafting material like prices get higher. So now, you know, you breeze through the content for the first month. You're heavily invested. Then now you get to decide like, do you continue or do you start opening your wallet? And then I did it maybe, yeah, I'll admit I did it for a few times. Then I'm like, okay, like when the next patch comes out. Now let's say if I hit 65, next patch is the new level cap is 70. It's like I'm gonna have to either grind 8 hours a day or more, or start spending cash.
Mm.
Yeah, how they structure it's super clever though.
I wonder if there will be a time where we get away from that type of pay structure for games. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, every game is meant to, well, not every game, but probably most games are trying to make profit off of its players. But I wonder if someday we'll ever see a transition away from that, because it does. I mean, yeah, it's clever, but at the same time, I'm sure for every single one of us, every other player would find it generally off-putting that they're playing a game. Well, I guess unless it's free to play, but that the game is intentionally being meant to hold you down until you pay up. So I don't know. Yeah, I wonder what if we'll transition from it. I mean, back then, back when we were younger, it was pay just upfront, pay $20, $40, $50, $60 one time for a game, whether it's single player, multiplayer, and you had subscription based, like for MMORPGs that came out, battle passes, pay to win. So I wonder what would be next. But I mean, I could definitely get. I definitely have no problem with paying one-time costs, monthly cost, battle passes. If I really like the game, like Apex, right? Like I still don't have a problem with paying for a battle pass $10 for a game like Apex that I enjoy. But yeah, paywall ones, yeah, that's a hard one for me.
Yeah, same. It just I would feel very discouraged. Like once I hit that wall, and that it would just be like pay for the convenience. And actually, I think that kind of takes it back to like certain days with like Maple Story and stuff. I'm just getting like some flashbacks to that, and like I think they didn't really have like a grind paywall thing, but like to access gear and stuff, like you really had to spend a whole lot of cash on gear to be able to do things. And yeah, that going through that immediately like burned me out from it, and I just didn't want to touch it anymore. Um, yeah, but definitely would prefer like the one-time purchase.
Didn't they have a lawsuit recently?
I would not be surprised.
Because I think on certain items, the row chance, I think they lied about the percentages. And like, I think some items you could never get or something. No matter how much you spent.
Yeah, I think I saw something like I think it was some politician in Hawaii was advocating for some kind of law to deal with that too. But yeah, definitely not the greatest. It also makes me think whether or not those kind of games are they really fun, or is it more playing on the human psyche for getting it to keep on rolling, right? Keep on pushing to satisfy that. I don't know what's the word, that the hormonal urge, or that dopamine urge, I suppose. I wonder if the game is good, or maybe the game is good, but maybe more so that it's the dopamine hit for, I don't know, paying for something or whatever is being done to kind of make the game kind of pull you in and keep on going. But yeah, I don't know. It would be interesting. It was definitely the state of game development that we've been hearing about the news these days a lot. I mean, a lot of us, we all heard, and many people, many other gamers out there who follow this kind of stuff heard that we hear layoffs or studio closures. I mean, probably the most biggest one, well-known one, is the whole layoffs that occurred, shutdowns occurred when Microsoft acquired Activision Blizzard. And unfortunately, that's with acquisitions like that, it is expected to have some layoffs. I mean, that's just kind of name of the game, right? To get rid of redundancy.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it's not only that though, but we are seeing just in general closes in general, right? So I mean, you have Sony. I mean, Sony. You would argue Sony has been getting a pretty good run with things that have been happening with it, right? I mean, it's definitely much more popular in terms of console war. Their PlayStation console is doing way better than over the Xbox right now. The games that are coming out on PlayStation are pretty good, pretty good exclusives too. And yet, you have news about layoffs, you have studio closures, you had games that were being planned, being shut down. Like for example, the rumored The Last of Us online multiplayer game that was being worked on, right? And ultimately, the more I think about it, it kind of gets back to what we were mentioning a little bit about before in the past recordings, where the cost of game development is definitely way too big. And not only that, they take a long time too. I mean, some of these games take 4 years, but 5 years, 6 years. I mean, you can have another Final Fantasy. It was Versus 13, but it became Final Fantasy 15 because the development time was so long that it fell over into the next console generation. And you have what was that multiplayer game that came out but no one bought it? I forgot.
Concord,
yeah. Concord, right? Was it 8-year time frame and with a huge budget? I mean, I get that as a game, we want to have the greatest visuals, the greatest gameplay, and then maybe the fastest net code and all that good stuff. But there definitely is a point that I think we're now seeing it where the cost of making a game, a AAA game anyway, is just being way more than it's worth, or at least the amount of money that's being put in to build these games is not definitely not coming out with the amount of return that these publishers, game studios, are expecting. And as I think about it, the industry, or at least the ones that are making AAA games, definitely are in a moment of, I guess, rethinking of their approach, because it's definitely not sustainable. I mean, obviously it's not, because there's so many layoffs happening. A lot of talented, I'm sure very talented game developers, artists that built their careers around making games are just not are being laid off and made out of work, and no guarantee. We all hope for the best, but if you have a lot of studios laying people off, what's the chances that the people who get laid off are able to find similar work to be able to make games? So ultimately, it's just not sustainable with the way these games are being made now. And I suspect that, well, my hopefully positive thought is that this doesn't hurt the game industry going forward. And in fact, maybe hopefully this is just maybe a bad time now, in that, so you have a lot of things with AI, right? For example, I watched a little bit of the Unity convention, or Unity showcase that they had announcing Unity 6. And a lot of the big emphasis on that was being able to use these new tools or AI tools for Unity to help, speed up the game process. So definitely, with improved software to make games, hopefully it'll make game development cheaper, faster, more efficient. I definitely don't see AI as a thing where it would make games. As long as you have the right people, I definitely don't think AI would hinder game development in any way as long as you have the right people making sure that they're being creative and being smart with how they build games. So I'm hoping that with these new AI tools that are coming out to support game making, it'll make the cost of making AAA games a lot more cheaper, a lot more effective, so that we don't have to wait so long, right? Like maybe 4 years, but maybe even less, right? Because it's faster. But even if with the layoffs, right, and because with the tools that are out there, I definitely argue that it is, compared to before, much easier for people to make games, indie games, and not just indie games in general, but just being able to do business in general. So if you're like maybe like a solo like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 person team, it would be the barrier of entry to get a game out the door is definitely much more easier compared to what was before. And the thing about game development is that you don't necessarily, it's not so, with the way some people say programming coding is a bit intimidating, and I would say it can be, but the trend in general is, even with not even game software but just software in general, is that there's a push where coding itself is actually less the important task, right? It's more of the whole upper level, higher level planning, designing, ideating. So, and there are a lot of these tools that are trying to make the whole technical part of any software, whether it's game or traditional software, much more hands off. So I would hope that a lot of these people who are getting laid off are still going to put themselves in the industry by making games that are higher quality at an indie level, right? That way we get more variety. That way we also get more cost efficient type of industry where we have indie game developers really a lot more out there, really making games faster at a probably comparable quality to AAA games, right? Because I argue you can make a AAA game, but do you really need all that technology to make it a AAA game? Probably not, right? I know, like Raymond always tells me that your game can look pretty, your game could have great art and so forth, but if the gameplay sucks, it's not gonna be fun, right? And who's gonna play it, kind of thing, unless you're getting some kind of dopamine hit for kind of like the loot box kind of thing. But yeah, I'm hoping with all these layoffs and all these closures that the people who do get laid off are going to actually help stay within the industry and push things going forward. Given that it's just much easier to make games on a smaller scale, right? And I suspect that my hot take would be that because of that, we'll be able to get higher quality games, or quality games at a faster rate and at a lower price point that's definitely more sustainable, versus having to wait for a game that's like maybe every 4 years, 5 years. And if it becomes successful, waiting for another 4 or 5 years for a sequel and so forth. We're able to make games that are just coming in at a faster cadence and definitely much more sustainable, because at this point today, it definitely is not sustainable. No way, right? So many layoffs, so many closures to studios that don't deserve to be closed, and given the type of quality games like Hi-Fi Rush, right? Arcane Studios, those kind of studios where we know that their work is top-notch quality stuff, but for them to just get the cut like that is a shame. But it's a shame because it's because of money, not because of a lack of quality in their work. It's because of the boring aspect of corporate finances not being up to what investors want it to be, right? Or trying to please the investors. So something I think about a lot lately. I definitely hope that it does get better, and I'm optimistic it will be. I mean, I definitely think in general, with the whole way society is going forward these days. Not just specific game development, but the whole idea of it's just easier to run your own business or make your own product these days. I mean, of course, you might end up getting more poor quality stuff in the market now, but otherwise, it's just easier to do things on your own. So I'm hoping that these layoffs, these closures, actually they're punishing now, but hopefully they do turn out to be something better for all of us gamers out there that enjoy playing these things and want more variety too, right? So unlike Ubisoft, right? Like you told me, Raymond, right? That Ubisoft is always, or no, or you, Andrew, both mentioned that Ubisoft kind of makes a template and just every game has a different skin. Otherwise, it's at its core, it's essentially the same game as the last thing. So yeah, that's what I've been thinking about these days.
I feel like with that, it's like, yes, with a lot of these layoffs, there are going to be some people who are looking at, going back into the industry, looking to jump ship with like a different company or a different developer, publisher, what have you. And you're going to have some people who decide to start building up a small team or just go solo and develop games that way too. And I do think that is a possibility to also help boost like creativity and variety of games. I mean, all these people who are trying to make it solo too, it's still really hard, right? Like financially, they like, yes, there are a lot of resources out there that make things easier. These people are incredibly experienced now if they were caught in the layoffs, and so they could probably produce something rather quickly and at a very high caliber. But it's still time. It's still not an income or like a steady income coming in at that moment, and so you have people running around in this rat race to try to have that level of stability in there. But I don't know, it just ultimately it's on these larger companies that are in charge of these layoffs, right? Like the Microsofts, like the Sonys, so on and so forth. And I do hope that with this period in gaming, they learn from this, right? And because I do feel like a lot of these layoffs happened because of the risks that executives took to, like especially over the past couple of years, to focus on the live services game or live service games, right? Which can be great and can be incredibly profitable, but it's kind of going back to what Raymond brought up in his topic, where there's only so much time to give for all of these games that are seemingly like endless, right? And at a certain point, it's going to start cannibalizing all the players, and some are going to come out on top than others. And I feel like if companies are going to focus on some live service games, it should be like a calculated decision to be like, okay, we'll do like one, and this is sort of like risk taking, but all these other ones are going to be games that are a little bit smaller in budget, smaller in scope, can be produced a lot more quickly, right? And if it doesn't sell well per se, or just makes it by like breaking even, it's not to the point where it'll completely shut down a studio, right? Like I think that wasn't even a conversation point 10 years ago, definitely even 5 years ago, right? Like, but now if a game does not sell well, immediately the conversation goes to, is the studio even going to be here in another year or so, right? And so I hope a lot of these execs are reconsidering their decisions, and if they are going to take these chances to try not to put everything in one basket of live service games as a whole and still diversify their what do you call it, like their catalog of stuff.
Yeah, I
Well, for
definitely think it's
me,
like it's a bit. I agree with the whole idea that it is possible that we're gonna get influx of things that are maybe too much. Like we mentioned, we all have a backlog, right? Which I admit, but definitely more sustainable. And then hopefully that not only that, it's maybe there will be a change, a different frame of thinking where there will be an investment to support these smaller studios, such that it is not a financial burden or like a financial gamble, right? Like you said, right? You know, when a person making a game, there's no, or a team is making a game. It maybe they're fortunate, they have resources, and maybe they're indie developers are doing it on the side and of a full-time job. Then cool, right? Then maybe they can do it on the side. But it would be also cool, which I haven't seen much of, but it would be also cool to kind of see where there's a whole kind of like a whole investment-esque type of paradigm, right? So you have a lot of, like, for software, for example, right? You have a lot of tech startups. They get funded by venture capital or private money, and they're just trying to like fundraise as much as possible, right? Not necessarily to say that I think this is a good idea, but it would be interesting to see where you can have indie developers. It becomes more of a norm where that kind of investment money is there for game development, because like you mentioned, right, Andrew, it's when you have a smaller scaled game, it would be less risk, right, less of a gamble, and to maybe you won't necessarily get a high rate return if you're an investor into a game or game studio, but maybe you would still get a decent return, maybe not a crazy colossal amount of returns if you were to maybe make the next Halo or the next Call of Duty, for example, or the next Final Fantasy, but less risk. All right, and then like I said, if they have that kind of investment platform, even if there's a loss, it wouldn't be a game breaking kind of loss. And then on top of my head, the only I know there are two places that do that. There could be more, but maybe it's not a lot. But there's one I know in Hawaii called, like, I think Blue Investors, something like that. They invest in games or people who make games, and the company that made Among Us, they have like a sidearm that funds games that have a thought out plan with no strings attached for the most part, I believe. So seeing something more of that would be very interesting versus having to try to make a deal for a publisher and being at the whims of the publisher, or having the publisher kind of dictate a little bit, unless they have some kind of unique contract that allows them the freedom to make the game without any interference. But you still get that flexibility. So it would be interesting to me. It would be interesting to see that. And another thing I probably would expect to see, and actually would like to see, but people may not like this, but the price of games probably need to be more standardized. And I mean standardized meaning that, for the most part, well, maybe not standardized, but more like the price of games probably need to realistically reflect the cost of games, the cost of making games, meaning that the games. So I remember back then, right? PlayStation 1, for example, right? The games were like $20, maybe $30. I forget. And they were like that for quite a while. Then you had PlayStation 2 games, right? And those are like maybe like 40, 50 maybe. And then, for many years, right? Eventually, when we got to, I think, a PS4, maybe, type of game, then we were starting to see like $60, right? Whereas now you see games that are free to play, sure. But for games that are one-time purchase, right, the pricing is like all over the place. Like, I've seen games that are like $40 today, and I've seen games that are $60, which is technically the standard. But I've also seen games that are $70, and then you have publishers making excuses to raise the price to like $100 to $200, right, by making like these deluxe editions or day one editions, stuff like that. When you argue the stuff they're packaging in those specialized higher price editions are really not worth the extra 20, 30, $40, right? Rather just people may not agree with this, but just keep the price standardized such that you're charging a higher price, but you don't have to make all this weird additions to go with it to try to get more money. Whereas you can just build a game and then bundle it and price it as it should be, right? And that makes it more sustainable, because you can argue that the rising cost of making game is much more higher, but the price of games hasn't been. And you might say, I think it would be wrong for people to think that people who play games don't have money, because obviously a lot of people are paying for games, $5, $10, $20 month to month, year over year kind of things. I think it's to me, anyone who thinks that games are there are people who are not willing to pay for that. I think there definitely are people willing to pay for that. And I think actually would be over long term, if you're a regular gamer, would be more cost effective that way. In my thought. So, but I'm saying that from the perspective of making the game industry more sustainable, is my thought. Yeah.
And I think, I mean, I'm kind of conflicted on the idea of like standardized pricing, because like, we did have that for years, right? Especially during the PS2 going into the PS4 era. But there were still quite a few games that were just like not great, or I guess I should say, like, maybe not necessarily great, but like it didn't feel rewarding at times, right? Or like worth that cost. And so I do think the change in pricing, to drop down to like a $40 game, for example, that was like a part of the move to say like, hey, yes, this game might be shorter, right? Or might not necessarily be as refined. And so we recognize that. And so we're going to reduce this cost. But, on the flip side, all these different like deluxe editions or special editions, and, like we have some crazy things that are costing like $100, right? But, while I feel like companies shouldn't be doing this, clearly it works to some degree, right? Like there's got to be some type of market base that's purchasing this, that's telling these companies that like, yes, we should do this, or we could do this and still have a return on it. And so I think it ultimately kind of falls onto us, the gamers, right, the consumers, to finally take a stand. But I don't know if that's ever going to happen, right? Because I mean, they're clearly like a bunch of other like predatory practices that we see, but people are still investing in them, right? No matter what we say. And yeah, I don't know. It's going to be incredibly complicated. I don't think this is ever going to get solved or fixed. It's just is going to mutate and turn into a different beast at some point.
Yeah, see, the new thing is the early access now.
Right.
Like, there's a standard $60, and then if you get the deluxe, you get like a couple days early access now. So I think that's their new way to get people to pay a little bit more. But anyway, about AAA, I hope all of them burn down. I think they need a reality check. I think Ubisoft is going that route. I think Blizzard. Like, think about Blizzard. Like, StarCraft is dead. They don't support Heroes of the Storm. Diablo 4 is just negatively received. So I think maybe they were at the top too long. Maybe these major layoffs is like what Chris said, a good wake-up call.
Mm.
Maybe get the passion into making games again instead of just chasing the dollar. I mean, that's what I feel like they're doing now. The big studios and the corporations.
Yeah.
Good time for indies, though.
Yeah, it would be interesting to kind of see like a publishing company that emphasizes indie stuff, like for film, A24 films. I mean, like A24, they're always putting out stuff that are like just great stuff, like great horror stuff, great drama stuff, great thrillers, and they're not heavily high budgeted. I guess for films, right? For films, they're not heavily high budgeted. So, but their brand, the A24 brand, is huge, right? Like you have people who are like willing to buy A24 merch just because it's A24. The A24 brand, if you get picked up by the company for your film, that's already like a strong marketing point, right? And so it would be interesting to kind of see someday there being some sort of publishing company that kind of acts like an A24, right? It's going to invest money in you. It's going to support you, and you're not going to be spending tons of money to make your game. You're going to make something that's intentionally intended to be unique, creative. Maybe something that's really niche, but maybe something that's not. But you're not. But the goal is not to create like a out of the field, AAA blockbuster. The goal is to make something that's comparable or as entertaining, if not maybe even better, more entertaining than a AAA, but to push the medium in a new creative space, a new gameplay space. And yeah, I don't know I don't think there's any kind of published company out there, but it would be really interesting if someday a company like that came out that really emphasized support for that type of game, or like that type of that type of focus.
I think Annapurna was kind of like that, right? Like, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, they do have a development team, but with like that news article that we kind of took a deep dive in a couple of weeks ago, right? Their publishing team, I think that's essentially what they kind of did, right? They published some like indie critical darlings, right? Like one of their big one is like What Remains of Edith Finch, and I think they might have done Stray too, right? Which were both like critically well received and seen as very popular games, very different types of games out there. But once again, like execs kind of just seeing dollars, right? I mean, seemingly that's what the Fallout was all about, and the entire publisher team decided to walk out. But we'll see what happens there in a couple months, a couple years maybe. Yeah, but hopefully, I mean, they can get back to doing that because it did seem like they were publishing things based off of like just being different, and like kind of pushing the medium a little bit forward.
Yeah, be cool to see more of that. I mean, where is Annapurna going to be months from now? Hard to tell, but definitely would be cool to see more. If Annapurna was doing that before, it would be good to see more of a publisher like that was doing that. And hopefully there is. I know I'm being hopeful. I don't know if it will be. It's like you said, Andrew. A lot of it is money, right? So, the people who want to make games probably want to make games and expand their creative pursuits, and then you're gonna have people who want to make profit off of those ideas and maximize that profit. So, pessimistically, it's like, money's always gonna get in the way, but hopefully, it is. This will be reset, and we'll see something different going forward. Maybe smaller groups, smaller games, maybe a whole tonal shift. Ubisoft goes down. I don't know, for example, and you have a brand new publisher that just changes things, or they rework their whole their whole frame of thought on publishing games. We'll see, but yeah, that's where I stand.
All right. Well, we are coming up close to that 1 hour mark. We're actually going to hold off on my topic for this week and save it for next round. But thank you to Raymond and Chris for sharing your guys' thoughts on one, personal burnout with gaming, as well as just sort of what's happening within the industry. I know it was a little bit more of a somber note tonight, but I do think these are important conversations to have. Not just for high ups and executives, but just your everyday gamer. It's important to think about these things and really think about how we're spending our times with this particular medium. But in any case, like always, if you're catching us on YouTube, like, subscribe, and comment down below. But until next time, bye.